In September 2007, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was adopted in the United Nations General Assembly. New Zealand voted against the declaration. This was not covered by the mainstream media in New Zealand, and hence most New Zealanders don't even know it exists.
Do you know anything about the Declaration on the Rights for Indigenous People?
No. I don't know anything about it actually.
No.
Yeah.
No.
No.
For New Zealand?
Yeah.
Declaration? No.
No.
Nope. Never heard of it.
Well, it's called the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and it's a document which has now been passed as a declaration by the United Nations General Assembly.
That means it's a statement of good intentions by participating governments. The idea is that governments would throw their, shall we say, moral or political weight behind the rights of indigenous peoples.
The Declaration is a General Assembly resolution, and I think that's the most important thing to understand in terms of its international legal significance. And technically it's not legally binding. Well, it is aspirational. But I think that it's useful and important to consider that the Universal Declaration on Human Rights in the very beginnings of the United Nations is also just a universal declaration. So to say that it's aspirational is not to lessen its possible significance now and in the coming decades.
It does very much reflect the agreement amongst the indigenous people themselves, who have been negotiating in Geneva for a decade and a half in various forums, and the declaration then is a culmination of quite a long process of deliberation and declaration drafting.
In total, when the vote came, 144 countries voted for it, and to give you a sense of the balance, there's I think 192 member states in the General Assembly now. 4 countries voted against it, United States, Canada, Australia and New Zealand.
Well, the New Zealand government has had problems with it right from the start. The notion of indigenous or collective rights is still unclear in international law.
In my opinion, New Zealand didn't sign it because of the provision in Article 3 of the Declaration that refers to the right of self-determination of indigenous peoples.
The Western political legal system is founded on the notion of individual rights. The notion of collective rights, or rights of indigenous people, or rights of particular ethnic groups, is a somewhat more difficult concept because it cuts across the individual rights concept.
The text New Zealand would have preferred to have had something that balanced the statement about self-determination and about sovereignty or territorial integrity of New Zealand. There was also some more specific concerns that they had, which relate to Articles 19 and 32, which the New Zealand government described as a veto power, giving indigenous peoples a veto power over decisions that would be made by governments. In fact, the declaration simply requires there to be consultation and good faith with indigenous peoples. It's a long cry. The text is a long way from giving a veto power.
My assessment of it is that there are some occasions in which the present government thinks so-called middle New Zealand, so-called mainstream New Zealand wants us to give some indications that we're on their side. And here was a nice, easy way that they could do that. They could line themselves up with Canada, the United States, Australia, and say, we are a democratic, liberal democratic country. We have got a strong commitment to human rights, and we've got the Treaty of Waitangi in New Zealand. We don't need this international law. We don't need this declaration, and we get we stop the hemorrhage of votes to the rednecks.
It was predictable that it would happen, and it was part of a consistent pattern of the current government's dealings with indigenous people.
I think that the foreshore seabed issues should have taught the Labour government that they seriously cannot take Māori for granted.
One of the points that the New Zealand government has made in the international debate about this is that it is in fact honouring obligations to Indigenous populations.
The New Zealand government is absolutely committed to negotiating a just and fair compensation with Maori, with the principle of biculturalism and also multiculturalism. There's certainly no slacking of that commitment. That is, the treaty settlement process continues. The commitment to Maori affirmative action and other privileges do continue without any slowing down because of this particular issue.
This is 20 or more years in the making. This is not just one election, one government. This should be seen as part of the ongoing evolution of human rights norms. Anything that enables all citizens to look at these issues and reflect on them and work out that it is actually possible to acknowledge Indigenous rights and then, my gosh, the sun rose the next day.
Given the charged political atmosphere surrounding this declaration, New Zealand doesn't look very good.
I'm not entirely sure that the rest of the world is looking so closely at New Zealand's position on Indigenous people, although we might like to think that they do. But I do think that it was a lost opportunity for New Zealand to show some leadership.
There were about 50 governments who didn't bother to turn up at the get-together at which this was decided, and a number of governments that did turn up abstained. So New Zealand, in fact, was not totally isolated along with the other three.
Well, it leaves New Zealand extremely exposed now, because of those 4 nations that voted against the declaration, the Australian government has since changed, and the new Australian government has said that they now agree with the declaration. And the Canadian government is a minority government, and the Canadian Parliament has passed a resolution supporting the declaration. So that brings us down to 2. Just the United States and us.
Many governments had doubts, and even those governments that signed up to it then stood up and made declarations. Now, as you know, in the treaty process, there is something called declarations, reservations, understandings, and so forth, that each government can attach to the signature of that treaty. And one government after another stood up and said that they understood that this declaration would not impugn their sovereignty. It gave Indigenous people no rights to land or resources, which belonged ultimately to the state. Sweden said the Sami people already had reindeer rights, but should not gain any rights over forests, which remained the government of Sweden to allocate forest rights. And Britain and Indonesia said, well, we don't have any, Britain said we don't have any indigenous people, so it doesn't apply to us. And Indonesia said we are all indigenous people. So again, it doesn't apply to us because it makes no distinction.
A number of Māori groups said, we're not getting any change out of the system in New Zealand. You know, we've been to the courts, we thought we'd won the case on jurisdiction, then they cut it off with an act of parliament. Go to the tribunal, they make recommendations, the government turns it down. What can we do? So they called in the United Nations, and Rodolfo Stoppenhagen, the special rapporteur, came to New Zealand, gave an excellent report, which lots of people, including people in your class, should read, on sort of the vulnerability of Indigenous rights in the New Zealand Constitution. Immediately dismissed by the government. Immediately dismissed. Well, the thing is that when you've got something like this declaration, you can keep on coming back.
It would open up the government to possible litigation, at least to political demands, and the whole thing would then pass into the political arena, where it is already, in the sense that this declaration would not resolve any of the legal issues that are not already being addressed through the normal judicial process and the Treaty of Waitangi process.
I think that we are well past the time when we should be having a yes-no discussion about whether Indigenous peoples have a right of self-determination, and we actually need to be moving on to discussing the contours of that and how that fits in with today's society in New Zealand. And voting for this declaration would have allowed us to leave behind the yes-no debate and move on to something more interesting and challenging.
Should I still ask questions, Stephen?